I lay motionless in the sterile hospital room, my body frail and vulnerable, tethered to machines that beeped steadily like a ticking clock, counting down the moments I had left. Each shallow breath was an effort, but it was the weight of what I was about to face that pressed heaviest against my chest. The door opened, and their voices drifted in, not soft whispers of concern, but sharp, cold demands. "Dad, it's time we talked about the will," my son said, his words slicing through the quiet with an unsettling sharpness. His tone contained no warmth, no care. It was as if I was not a man lying clinging to life, but just a fortune to be divvied up. Next came my daughter, echoing his impatience, her voice laced with entitlement. "We've waited long enough, Dad. It's only fair." They had been absent when I was at my weakest. No visits, no encouragement in those long nights when death seemed close. Yet here they were now, sudden and sure, standing over me with their demands. It was a betrayal so raw, I felt my heart sink beneath the exhaustion of my failing body. The very people I had spent my life protecting, providing for, were now laying claim to my legacy as if it were a debt they were owed. Their faces, once familiar and filled with kindness, looked like strangers, hollow, impatient and greedy. I could feel their eyes scanning me, calculating, waiting for me to acquiesce. I tried to summon words, but my voice was feeble, a whisper lost in the harsh light of the hospital room. Instead, I held my breath and steeled myself against the flood of bitterness that welled inside. How had it come to this? Their insistence that this was for my own good rang hollow to my ears. They said they wanted to help manage my affairs, to make things easier. But it was obvious it was about control, about dividing what they assumed was already theirs. I remembered the nights I spent burning the midnight oil, working overtime to keep a roof over their heads, the tuition payments I scrimped and saved for, the sacrifices that had become my silent suffering. And now those sacrifices were dismissed, their value reduced to a contract to be argued over in this cold, impersonal space. When they finally left, the room grew silent again, save for the relentless beeping of the machines. But inside me, a storm gathered. Betrayal burned hotter than any fever, their absence during my darkest hours, their sudden appearance to claim my possessions. It was like a slap to a face I no longer recognized. I was left thinking, not of defeat, but of what must come next. Though my body was weak, my mind was a fortress. I could still think clearly, analyze, plan. I was the engineer behind everything I had built, the strategist who had navigated complexities with calm and precision. Now, instead of surrendering, I began to craft a new blueprint, one of quiet resistance and calculated revenge. Their greed was a mistake. They underestimated me. The man tethered to this bed was not broken. Underneath this frailty lay decades of patience and resilience, and a determination tempered by pain, but never extinguished. I closed my eyes and breathed slowly, feeling a cold clarity settle within me. They had come to take what they wanted without effort, but I had no intention of handing anything over so easily. This was not just a family dispute. It was a reckoning, and I was ready to rise and reclaim what was mine, no matter the cost. The days that stretched out after I finally left the hospital were a strange mixture of physical weakness and restless thought. My body was battered, every step a careful measure, but my mind raced relentlessly. As I moved slowly through the once warm and lively home that my late wife and I had nurtured for decades, the silence felt almost foreign, empty spaces where laughter and love had once woven the fabric of our family. The garden, once meticulously cared for by her gentle hands, had grown wild and untamed, the edges blurring with the chaos that mirrored the turmoil inside me. Memories surged unbidden. I saw myself at the drafting table late into countless nights, bending over blueprints with patient precision, seeking solutions to impossible problems, ensuring every design was sound, every foundation solid. Those years had been a testament to sacrifice, sacrifices I had made silently, without complaint or recognition. The mortgage, paid off after years of frugality, the tuition fees sent each semester like quiet promises to a better future, the thin meals, skipped vacations, and countless hours logged to keep a roof firmly overhead. That house was not just walls and beams. It was a fortress built on hope and unyielding devotion, and yet when I lay frail and vulnerable in a hospital bed fighting for breath, the children I had raised, the heirs to these sacrifices, were nowhere to be found. Their absence was a scar deeper than any illness or injury. That sterile hospital room, meant to shelter recovery and compassion, instead became an arena where my worth was negotiated coldly, a ledger of assets debated with merciless greed. Their voices are burned in my memory, sharp, impatient, and void of love. How had everything I had given them been reduced to mere property, mere dollars and cents slipping from my grasp? I thought of my wife then, her warm smile glowing softly as we first settled into this home, the sanctuary she had dreamed of, a place where love was the foundation, unshaken by time or hardship. Without her, those walls echoed emptily, hollow of the affection and unity she once fostered. Now, their hearts seemed hardened, replaced by expectation and entitlement. The anger inside me simmered at the contrast. My quiet sacrifices met with blatant greed, but alongside that fire grew a cold resolve. This was not about money alone. It was about the dignity earned through a lifetime of toil, the legacy I would not surrender. Their betrayal was a moral fracture that pierced me deeply, igniting a refusal to let injustice stand. With trembling hands, but a clear mind, I turned to the stacks of bank statements, contracts, and legal documents accumulated through the years, detailed records invisible to casual eyes. They revealed a tale of recklessness hidden beneath the surface. Debts ignored, investments made foolishly, credit lines maxed out without my consent, all threatening the future I had constructed. I was no longer just a victim. I was the architect who had spent decades solving complex threats, now poised to dismantle the web of deceit around me. Their impatience was their fatal flaw. While they pushed for quick control, I had the hard-earned patience of a lifetime, the ability to analyze, plan, and wait for the right moment. I sought out an old lawyer friend, a man steeped in the same values of integrity and justice who had advised me in my consulting days, and I engaged a private auditor to expose every hidden detail of their spending and debts. Night after night, amid mountains of papers and empty cups of coffee, I unraveled their mess. Loans taken in my name, debts mounting in silence, assets traded recklessly, all threatening ruin. The sting of their betrayal fueled a determination as fierce as any passion. The contrast between my sacrifices and their wastefulness was unbearable, and yet became my rallying cry. My resolve steeled, I began to craft a strategy not born of anger, but of cold calculation, patient, precise, and unrelenting. I thought of my grandchildren, innocent and unaware, deserving of an inheritance not tainted by greed or conflict, but safeguarded by justice. The legacy I would leave had to be more than wealth. It had to be a lesson in resilience and honor. In the late hours, as dawn crept through the curtains and bathed the study in pale light, I rehearsed my plans. Each financial irregularity was a thread to pull, each legal detail a hinge on which the future would turn. Their arrogance had blinded them to the danger they courted. They treated a frail old man as prey, unaware that the patient engineer beneath this body was already designing their downfall. Love, I came to realize, was the greatest gift, but without respect, it was fragile, vulnerable to betrayal. Respect, once broken, must be reclaimed not by pleading, but with strength and resolve. From those painful reflections, a new purpose emerged. The years of endurance shaped a spirit that refused to be broken by illness or deceit. Though my body ached, my will burned fiercer than ever. This was no longer a mere family quarrel. It was a reckoning, a battle for dignity, justice, and legacy. And I was ready to fight. With intelligence, patience, and unwavering resolve, I would reclaim the life and the legacy that was mine by right, no matter the cost. The week following my return home settled around me like a heavy fog, a mix of weariness from my weakened body and a restless fire stoked within my mind. The house, filled with echoes of my late wife and our shared dreams, felt strangely hollow, as if it waited for a new purpose to fill its walls. I moved carefully through the rooms, each step measured, my thoughts weighing far heavier than my aching limbs. Then came an unwelcome delivery, a legal notice demanding I sign over power of attorney to my children. Supposedly, it was a simple step to help manage my affairs during recovery, but their words masked a deeper hunger. I remembered my son's voice, so casually dropping the word fair, as if ownership and control were owed to them without question or effort. Fairness, they claimed. The irony was bitter. I had built this life for them, yet they demanded it now without any hint of gratitude. I held the paper in my hands, feeling its weight, as if it carried the final judgment. The morning light spilled softly into the room, but inside, a storm was rising, calm yet fierce. The haze of fragility lifted from my mind, replaced by crystalline clarity. I was no vulnerable old man to be shepherded by others. I was the engineer who had built every foundation in this house, literal and figurative. The thought fortified me. This moment was a crossroads, to surrender my legacy or to assume the role of its true guardian. Their mistake was grossly underestimating the man behind the weakening body. The pain had sharpened rather than dulled my resolve. I was no longer willing to be their puppet, no longer blind to their greed. Instead, I began plotting with the precision of a man who had spent his life tackling complex problems and erecting structures that defied destruction. This was to be a battle fought not in anger, but with cold, methodical calculation. My fortress was in the files I had maintained, ledgers, contracts, statements spanning decades. These pages held the truth they sought to obscure. I pored over every detail, unraveling reckless debts, hidden liabilities, and financial gambles they had made without consulting me. Each discovery was a wound, but also a weapon. Their careless choices were not only dangerous, they were an assault on everything I had strived to protect. I called upon a trusted attorney from my past, a man whose integrity was as solid as the foundations I had built. Together, we devised legal shields to fortify my estate, irrevocable trusts, freezes on suspicious accounts, and legal barricades to prevent unauthorized control. Alongside, I engaged a private auditor who began quietly exposing every trace of their irresponsible spending and financial mismanagement, building a dossier I would use to reclaim what was rightfully mine. Nights blurred together under harsh lights, surrounded by stacks of papers, tracing every errant loan, and every asset moved without my knowledge. The betrayal stung like 1,000 blades, but it sharpened my focus. I was resolute, knowing that beneath their careless indulgence lay the destruction of everything I had earned. Calls from my children came sporadically, half threats, half entreaties, with their confusion and frustration palpable. Yet I answered only with calm certainty, never stepping into the storm of anger, but instead standing firmly within the eye of calculated resolve. Their impatience was a liability. Mine was the slow, unyielding pressure of granite, time hardened. This struggle was more than financial, it was deeply personal. Each dollar squandered represented a sacrifice I had made in silence. Tuition bills paid with worn paychecks, nights sacrificed to blueprints under dim light, years of quiet perseverance. Their entitlement denied those sacrifices and demanded my surrender, but I refused to let bitterness cloud my judgment. Instead, a deeper strength took root, a clear vision of justice born from enduring love and unwavering principle. I was no longer the helpless victim of their greed. I was Leonard, the father who had built, the strategist who would protect. I thought often of my grandchildren, innocent and unaware, deserving of an inheritance untainted by conflict, security forged by resilience and justice. The legacy I would secure for them was more than wealth. It was a testament to perseverance, honor, and unyielding strength. In the quiet dawn, as light crept softly through the curtains, I rehearsed the plan that unfolded in my mind. Every financial anomaly was a thread to pull, every legal detail the hinge of a door to justice. Their arrogance blinded them to the approaching reckoning. They saw a frail old man, but failed to see the formidable engineer beneath, the man who had mastered structure and strategy alike. Reflecting deeply, I understood love as the greatest gift, yet a gift vulnerable when respect is broken. Respect, once lost, could not be bought with pleas, but regained through strength and relentless will. From these reflections, new purpose surged. Years of endurance had built a spirit unbroken by illness or deceit. Though my body ached with weakness, my spirit blazed fiercely, burning away doubt and surrender. No longer a mere family dispute, this was a reckoning, a fight for dignity, justice, and the preservation of legacy. Armed with intelligence, patience, and determination, I prepared to reclaim what was mine by right. The battle ahead would be long and difficult, but I welcomed it. This was my moment, the time to rise not as a victim, but as a force, steady, precise, and unyielding. I was ready to confront their arrogance and greed with the only weapons that mattered: my mind, my resolve, and my unwavering commitment to justice. I sat at my old oak desk, the surface worn smooth by decades of careful work and late nights, surrounded by stacks of papers and records that told the story of my life and sacrifices. I pored over every account, every contract, every legal document, tracing threads that had been frayed, tangled, or deliberately hidden by the very people I had raised. This phase of my fight was the most important, yet the most meticulous, uncovering the truth that would become the foundation of my defense and eventual reclaiming of my life and legacy. Engineering had always been about precision and foresight, and now those same skills defined my approach. I moved methodically, identifying every irregularity and dubious transaction. Secrets festered beneath layers of numbers, debts accumulated that I had never authorized, investments made recklessly in my name, assets siphoned into accounts that were a labyrinth of confusion and deceit. Every discovery deepened the wound of betrayal, yet it also steeled my resolve. They thought their carelessness would go unnoticed, that my weakened state would silence my vigilance. They had erred gravely. The very walls of my home, built brick by brick and beam by beam through years of sweat and diligence, now seemed to echo with a different purpose. It was no longer a sanctuary, but a command center. I transformed the familiar rooms into a war room, strategizing my every move. As I cross-referenced ledgers and financial statements, I sensed how much they underestimated not only my strength but my resolve. Their eagerness to seize what I had built was blind to the patience and wisdom I had accumulated over years of both personal and professional discipline. Realizing that I could not navigate this alone, I reached out to trusted allies from my past. An old friend, a lawyer whose integrity was beyond question, stepped forward to guide me through the intricacies of law and estate planning. He helped me draw up irrevocable trusts and legal barriers that would protect my assets from reckless claims. We filed freezes on suspicious accounts and restructured my will, ensuring that my wealth would be safeguarded for my grandchildren, the innocent heirs who deserved a chance at a peaceful future untouched by greed. Yet, legal measures alone could not expose the full extent of their deception. I engaged a private auditor, a relentless professional skilled in peeling back the layers of financial obfuscation. Day by day, they uncovered hidden transactions, unpaid debts, and unauthorized loans. The evidence mounted and the picture of their recklessness became impossible to deny. They had treated my estate not as a legacy but as a piggy bank, and I was determined to let the light of truth expose their actions. Despite the betrayal, I did not surrender to bitterness. Instead, a clear, unyielding sense of justice grew within me, born not only of my love for my family, but also of a deep commitment to right wrongs with dignity and resolve. I was Leonard, the father who had built a life from the ground up, no longer a victim, but a strategist ready to protect what was mine. Their phone calls became frequent and tense, reflected frustration and disbelief shaking their voices. "Dad, this isn't who you are," my daughter insisted once amid a torrent of accusations and pleas. I remained calm, measured in my response, unwavering in my stance. "I'm protecting everything I have worked for. I won't let recklessness undo a lifetime of sacrifice." Their shock was palpable, their facade of entitlement cracking under the weight of my newfound authority. They had expected submission and found resistance instead. I often thought about the sacrifices that had gone unnoticed, the nights I worked double shifts drafting plans under cold fluorescent lights, the missed vacations, the tuition paid out of modest savings. Each act had been a building block for my family's future. Now it was a shield against their greed. From these long reflections, it became clear that this was no longer just a financial dispute. It was a moral reckoning, a lesson in respect, responsibility, and the true cost of entitlement. My goal was not vengeance, but restoration, of dignity, of justice, and of the legacy I intended to leave for my grandchildren, a beacon of integrity and perseverance. With a plan sharpened by patience and precision, I began executing a multi-phase strategy. First, I froze suspect financial transactions, halting the flow of funds that threatened to drain my resources. Then, I activated irrevocable trusts to place my assets beyond their immediate grasp. Lastly, I prepared to present a comprehensive dossier of their mismanagement, supported by the auditor's thorough work, ready to use in any legal battles that lay ahead. I embraced patience as my greatest strength. Where they sought rash gains, I constructed a fortress of time-tested patience and legal maneuvering. I was unhurried, deliberate, sure of every step. The battle was no longer about quick wins, but about a lasting legacy fortified by knowledge and law. Days turned into weeks as I maintained the rhythm of my plans, balancing between gathering evidence and reinforcing protections. Each resolved issue was a beam set firmly into place, each legal safeguard another stone in the wall defending my life's work. My home, once a silent witness to family memories, had become the battleground of my resolve. This was a fight for more than assets. It was a struggle to preserve a name, a memory, and a set of values. The memory of my late wife, the promise of a safe future for my grandchildren, and my right to dignity demanded that I stand firm. With every methodical step, I broke down their false expectations of entitlement, replacing it with the hard truths of accountability and law. No longer could they rely on my silence or frailty. Behind closed doors, beneath a veneer of civility, the war was waged quietly but powerfully. I was no longer simply the fragile father they had dismissed. I was Leonard, the master architect of his destiny, commanding the fortress he built with unwavering focus and relentless resolve. From a place of betrayal and weakness, I emerged transformed, a man prepared to reclaim his life, protect his legacy, and ensure that justice would prevail. The battle continued, but my heart was steady, my mind sharp, and my purpose clear. The moment arrived when I finally severed their unauthorized ties to the accounts they had been draining behind my back, an action neither taken lightly nor with malice, but as a necessary shield, guarding the fortress I had built over a lifetime from the slow erosion their greed threatened to cause. I signed the paperwork methodically, freezing their transactions, halting payments on debts they had amassed without my consent, and locking down accounts they had treated as their personal reserve funds. The house, once filled with warmth and memories, felt heavy with tension. The air thickened, as if understanding the gravity of this invisible barricade I had constructed. The fallout was swift and overwhelming. Calls poured in, voices frantic, laced with accusations thinly veiled as concern, threats disguised as pleading. "Dad, what are you doing? You can't just shut us out." My daughter's voice cracked over the phone one afternoon, full of disbelief and desperation. I bore their frustration silently, my tone cold and firm. "I'm protecting what I earned, so it can't be wasted." My voice was the calm eye of an approaching storm. No longer was I the fragile figure weakened by illness. I had become an unmovable pillar of resolve. Their disbelief rapidly morphed into panic. Their carefully constructed plans crumbled in the wake of my actions. Confrontations escalated, some direct, some cloaked in thinly veiled concern or false remorse. "Dad, consider the family," my son urged during a tense conversation, eyes flashing with a mix of frustration and fragile hope. But I had learned how family could serve as both sword and shield, a fragile facade masking selfish intent. I met each encounter not with anger, but with steady silence, the most potent weapon I had. They labeled me cruel, heartless, even selfish. But I held on to the memory of countless nights spent working double shifts, the balancing of modest paychecks to cover tuition and urgent medical bills, the sacrifices I had made so they could live without fear. These quiet truths, though forgotten by them, stained deeply, fueling my resolve. Panic spread among them like wildfire. Each halted transaction, every paused payment, frayed their nerves. Desperate emissaries, friends and relatives, began appearing at my door, offering soft words and tender smiles to coax leniency, hoping to crumble my steadfast guard. But I was beyond sentiment. I stood resolute, fortified by preparation and vision. Their impatience had led to this downfall. An arrogant rush to claim what had not yet been earned awoke a force they had ignored. The patient, calculated strength carved out by a lifetime of endurance and intelligence. Their haste was my unspoken advantage. Yet beneath the surface of conflict, sorrow dwelled. Despite their betrayal, my love for them remained tangled with grief and disappointment. I mourned the family I once knew, the dreams shattered by greed and disrespect. But mourning was private. Action was imperative. I accepted that the road ahead would be long and arduous, fraught with tests of patience and endurance. Nevertheless, I had found new purpose: to protect what I had dedicated my life to teach the bitter lessons of respect and accountability, to safeguard innocence by standing firm amid betrayal. Often, fatigue threatened to drown me. My weakened body, worn by illness and emotional strife, begged for rest. Yet I rose each day, driven by the unyielding fire of defiance. The quiet strength within refused surrender. What I defended transcended possessions. It was the preservation of honor, memory, and our family's name. I refused to let reckless hands dismantle all that had been built with love and sacrifice. The legacy gifted by my late wife, the promise of security for my grandchildren, and my own dignity demanded unwavering defense. Behind the scenes, legal wheels turned relentlessly. My attorney crafted motions with precision, every letter and filing a strategic strike. The subtle games of law unfolded into a slow, deliberate chess match, where focus and foresight mattered most. I observed their unraveling with a cold eye, their confidence eroding under the unflinching spotlight of justice. Their entitlement, once a proud banner, now bore the stains of faltering certainty and exposed greed. Though fractured, I harbored guarded hope, not for easy reconciliation with those who betrayed me, but for a future where respect and integrity would rebuild the broken ties of family. I imagined my grandchildren growing not amidst conflict, but in a legacy of fairness and steadfast principle. The house bore silent witness to this battle. Its solid walls, the product of years of effort and love, stood unyielding, a symbol of enduring strength. Each creak and sigh of timber spoke not of defeat, but tenacity and will. Piece by painstaking piece, I dismantled their illusions of entitlement and replaced them with the stark reality of accountability. No longer could they exploit the assumptions of my weakness. Behind closed doors, beneath the polished surface of civility, the war was fought with quiet might and determination. I was no longer the vulnerable father they dismissed. I had become Leonard, the strategist, the architect, the guardian of his own destiny. From the depths of betrayal and frailty, I emerged transformed. A man resolute to reclaim his life, protect his legacy, and see justice served. The battle waged on, arduous and relentless, but my heart was steady, my mind sharpened by clarity, and my purpose unwavering. I was no longer on the defensive, but advancing with the unfaltering resolve of one who had seen the worst and decided to rise, unbroken and triumphant. The air was heavy with anticipation as I arrived at the courthouse, a place that had played witness to countless battles throughout my life, both professional and deeply personal. The grey sky mirrored the gravity of the moment as clouds gathered without the promise of rain, much like the tensions that had been simmering for months within my fractured family. With each step toward the imposing building, memories surged. The long years of sacrifice, the nights spent poring over blueprints and financial records, the smiles of my late wife as we built this haven together. Today was not just about money or assets. It was about honoring those memories and ensuring that the legacy we had forged would survive the storm of greed and entitlement. As I entered the courtroom, I felt the eyes of many fixed upon me. Some sympathetic, others skeptical. I could sense the tension in the room, the unspoken judgments cast upon me, a frail old man who many assumed would fold under the pressure. Yet beneath this frailty, I harbored a quiet strength, a resilience honed by a lifetime of overcoming hardship and betrayal. I was no longer the man they thought I was. I was Leonard, the unyielding father who had weathered decades of storms and was now prepared to defend all he held dear. The room was divided. On one side sat my children and their spouses, faces pale and taut with anxiety. Their legal representatives prepared to dismantle my claims with the kind of cold certainty only money and entitlement could buy. On the other side, my allies, my attorney, a trusted friend, and witnesses stood ready to expose the truth. The judge, solemn and measured, called the session to order with a commanding voice that echoed through the chamber. Their lawyers opened with a calculated narrative designed to weaken me. They painted a picture of a man overwhelmed, incapable of managing his affairs, and in need of their intervention. They portrayed their demands as necessary stewardship, a means to protect the fragile patriarch they claimed I was. Sympathy settled like a fog across the courtroom, softening the atmosphere and, for a moment, threatening to undermine my case before it had even begun. When my turn came, I rose slowly, steadying myself against the tide of doubt and pity. I spoke with the measured calm of a man who knew the truth and was ready to lay it bare. Piece by piece, I dismantled their narrative with facts and evidence drawn from countless hours of research and preparation. I presented documents revealing reckless spending, concealed debts, and unauthorized financial maneuvers. I laid bare the legal safeguards I had put in place, irrevocable trusts and financial freezes that protected the estate from their reckless hands and preserved it for the innocent, for my grandchildren. I did not merely recite numbers and contracts. I told the story the documents could not. I spoke of the sacrifices made silently over decades, the overtime shifts and sleepless nights, the tuition fees that never wavered despite my own struggles, the home built with every penny saved and every ounce of love given. I painted a portrait of devotion and betrayal, underlining the cold reality that my sacrifices had been met, not with gratitude, but with greed. A hush fell over the courtroom as my words hung in the air. I scanned the faces of my children. The smug assurance I remembered had slid into confusion, even doubt. Their thin veneer of entitlement was cracking beneath the weight of undeniable truth. The attorneys on the opposing side faltered, their rebuttals losing certainty as the evidence and heartfelt testimony swayed the judge and observers alike. When I detailed the protections for my grandchildren, the true heirs deserving an inheritance unmarred by conflict and carelessness, it was clear the court understood the gravity of my burden and the righteousness of my cause. These legal measures were not punitive, but protective, aimed at preserving a legacy for those who deserved a future unmarred by their forebears' mistakes. The opposition struggled to mount a convincing defense, their arguments sounding increasingly hollow amid the concrete evidence and steadfast testimony. The courtroom atmosphere shifted from one of tentative judgment to the sobering reality that justice was on my side, quiet, relentless, and inevitable. Throughout the proceedings, I caught subtle glances of acknowledgement from allies seated quietly in the courtroom, a nod of respect, a tight smile, small beacons of solidarity that buoyed my tired spirit. Their quiet support reminded me that honor and resilience were still valued, even in the harsh glare of legal scrutiny. I concluded my testimony with a statement that crystallized everything. Your greed blinded you to the sacrifices I made. Now, it costs you everything. The silence that followed was profound, heavier than any gavel strike. The judge's attentive gaze and the weight in the silence spoke volumes. When the verdict was delivered, it was a moment of quiet triumph. The court affirmed the financial mismanagement uncovered, upheld the legal protections I had established, and ensured that the estate would be preserved for those it was truly meant to serve. My children's claims were denied, not just of money, but of the dignity they had recklessly assumed. No outbursts followed. Instead, there was only the cold acceptance of exposure. As I stepped from the courthouse, the crisp air filled my lungs with a clarity and relief I hadn't felt in years. The weight that had pressed down upon me was lifted, if only slightly, by the knowledge that the battle's tide had turned. Justice had been served, not with vengeance, but with unwavering resolve and truth. I reflected on the years of fighting, on the sacrifices made in silence, on the countless sleepless nights spent protecting and providing despite every hardship. Though the wounds of betrayal ran deep, the foundation I laid remained strong, my dignity and honor intact, fortified by patience and resilience. This victory was not mine alone. It was the inheritance I secured for my grandchildren, the promise that they would grow up surrounded by a legacy of fairness and steadfast principle. It was a testament to the belief that even in the darkest hours, justice prevails when met with courage and clarity. As I walked away from the courthouse steps, memories of my wife's gentle smile and the home we built together filled me with quiet strength. Though the path ahead remained uncertain and fraught with challenges, for the first time in years, I felt a peace that I had reclaimed my life on my terms, not as a defeated man, but as a guardian of justice and honor. The house felt different now, quieter, yet somehow freer. The shadows that had long haunted its corners seemed to retreat, replaced by a stillness that was not emptiness, but a release from the weight of conflict. I moved through the rooms with a new sense of purpose, each step resonating with the solid foundation of a life reclaimed and a legacy protected. The battle for justice was behind me, and though the scars of betrayal remained, they served as reminders of survival, not defeat. I often found myself by the window, gazing out at the garden my wife had once tended with such care. It was wild now, overgrown in places, yet vibrant and alive. It was a testament to resilience, much like the strength I had discovered within myself. Life, I realized, is often about growing through adversity, about how roots disturbed by storms can regrow deeper and stronger. Just as the garden survived neglect and weathered seasons, so too had I found a way to flourish amidst the ruins left by treachery. Their absence no longer pierced me with the sharp sting of betrayal. The children I had nurtured, supported, and sacrificed for had made their choices. I held no illusions about rebuilding bridges with those who showed no respect or gratitude. Love, I understood, was not always enough to heal the wounds of greed and entitlement. Respect must be earned, and theirs had been squandered long ago. The legacy I had fought to protect was for those who deserved it, the innocent, the honorable, those who valued integrity over entitlement. In this new chapter, I redirected my energy toward renewal. I reconnected with the world of engineering, a field that had once defined me and now offered a path to purpose beyond familial strife. Mentoring young engineers, sharing not just the technical skills but the hard-earned wisdom of resilience, became my new calling. Passing on lessons of patience, perseverance, and integrity felt like building a different kind of foundation, one that extended beyond the walls of my home to the hearts and minds of others. Each project I undertook was infused with the quiet strength I had forged in adversity. My hands, though aged and less steady, guided eager learners through the nuances of the craft. I found joy in watching them grasp concepts, in knowing that the values I cherished would live on through their work and their character. This became my new legacy, something enduring and meaningful beyond material wealth. I no longer sought validation from those who had betrayed me. Instead, I measured my worth by the knowledge that I had stood firm, by the peace that came from living true to my principles. The days settled into a rhythm of quiet satisfaction. Work well done, lessons passed forward, dignity preserved. In the solitude of evening, I often whispered a mantra that had carried me through the darkest days. In protecting my life and legacy, I found something more, my own freedom. Freedom from resentment, from sorrow, from the chains of expectation and disappointment. That freedom was the greatest prize, a treasure born from struggle and perseverance. This peace was hard-won, forged in the fires of betrayal and tempered by relentless resolve. The house, once a battleground of fractured family ties, had become a sanctuary of healing and reflection. Each creak of the floorboards, each ray of fading sunlight through the windows spoke of endurance and renewal. I accepted that my family might never be whole again, and that some wounds could not be healed by time alone. Yet, I found solace in the legacy of wisdom and justice I had secured. This legacy would endure beyond the conflicts, a beacon for those who understood that true strength lies in patience, honor, and the courage to stand firm. Though the future remained uncertain and fraught with challenges, I faced it with a heart steady and a spirit unbroken. The peace I had reclaimed was not the quiet of surrender, but the silence of victory, the calm that follows a hard-fought battle when justice is restored and dignity reclaimed. As twilight bathed the garden in golden light, I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. The path ahead was my own to walk, shaped by trials, yet illuminated by hope. I had risen from the ashes of betrayal, not as a man broken, but as one reborn, steadfast and free.